Hey, junior highs, what's up? It has been a minute, like a serious minute or two. Honestly, it might have been 2 minutes. I haven't seen you. I haven't connected with you. How y'all doing? It's 2022. Did you know that? That we're in 2022? It blows my mind. Anyways, how's your week been? How are you doing? What did you do this week? At school, at home, at soccer practice, which might be virtual soccer practice, and I don't really know how that would work, but it might work if you have a VR. Anyways, tell me how your week has been. I'm here, I'm live. I wanna know how your week has been. Put it in the chat. Be like, well, Leader Stephanie, it's been quite good. Thank you for asking. And I'll be like, well, here. Anyways, y'all, I am so pumped for this trending series. It's a one-time, one shot, and we're done, but it is something that is super, super important. I'm so thankful that we're talking about it. It's something that is trending in the world right now, and something that we gotta talk about. And not only talk about, we gotta do something about. You ready to hear what it is? It's about racial tension. Racial tension. It's about the racial tension in this world. It's pretty crazy right now. We're learning a lot. There's a lot happening, and we're gonna talk about it. And we're not only gonna talk about it today, we're gonna find actionable ways to be about it. Not just talk about it with each other online and just type a couple of things, but actually how we can take steps to be about it, to stand up for it when we see it. So, I'm gonna start with a story of mine, but before I do, this looks like a brand new area. You're like, wow, where is this in the church? Is Leader Stephanie somewhere else? This is, ladies and gentlemen, the brand new youth room. This is your brand new youth room. I am so pumped to be able to have you guys come in here and learn about Jesus and have an awesome, awesome time. I can't wait. It's gonna be so much fun. So as soon as COVID restrictions let up, this is the place where you're gonna wanna be. This is where we're gonna hang out and talk and grow together, and I can't wait for that moment. But we got a couple more, I don't even know, like weeks, months, years, I don't know. We got a little bit of time before you guys get to come in here, but trust me, when you do, you'll never wanna leave, because I don't wanna leave. So I wanted to do this video here today. But let's get back to racial tension. I got a story for you. Now, if you are Black, if you are brown, if you are Asian, if you are a different race, you probably have your own experiences with racial tension. You might be living it right now in your life, or you might have experienced it, or you might have seen it being experienced by a family member, maybe your parents or something like that. Your parents told you a story. It's something that we're dealing with. We are so lucky to live in the Greater Toronto area where culture and different races merge together. We are like a hot pot here. We got so much happening, and I love it. I love the diversity of this church. I love the diversity of this community, and I love the diversity of this group. We make up so many different races and cultures, and it's so awesome to learn about each other. And I feel, especially me, even me, when I come into this space, I don't feel singled out. I feel welcomed, and I feel accepted for who I am, which is really, really cool. But it hasn't always been the case for me like that when I was younger. When I was younger, I lived in a town outside of Toronto that was predominantly a white town. And so I really was one of the only Black kids at my school. And it was really tricky for me because if you didn't know, I'm mixed, which means my mom is white and my dad is Jamaican. Put it all together and you get me. And what that means is I lived predominantly with my mom's side, so I saw a lot of my white family all the time. And then I went to school and I had all my teachers were white and all the students were white. And it was really hard for me to know who I was and to understand my identity and to recognize that despite the color of my skin, I am still one of God's children. God created us in his image, and his image doesn't change depending on the color of your skin. God made humans, and he made us all different on purpose. Could you imagine if we all looked the same? That'd be weird. It'd be weird and it would be so unoriginal. Like, what would make me Steph? If we all looked the same, how would you know that I was Steph and she wasn't Steph? Or I was Steph and he wasn't Steph? We'd all be the same. God created us all differently on purpose. He wanted us to be different, and he wanted us to make up this beautiful image of differences, but coming together to know of his love. So today in the stories, it's gonna be a little bit different. We're gonna hear about a whole bunch of different stories from a whole bunch of different people. And these stories are about racial tensions. And it's about the things that they've learned throughout navigating those racial tensions. So I really want you to lean in. The magic and the power about storytelling is that we can learn about ourselves through someone else's story. It's not necessarily your story, but the thing is that the story is so impactful, we can draw things from it and we can learn from it. So the goal today is to learn, is to listen, and then at the end, we're gonna try and figure out ways that we can be about it. We wanna be about it, we wanna take action, we don't wanna just sit still. And so that's what we're gonna look at, and that's what we're gonna focus on today. So jump into the Bible story, or it's not really a Bible story, it's different stories about people and their racial tension and how it made them come closer to Jesus. So let's listen to those stories, and I'll see you when we get back. All right.
Hi friends, my name's Katie and I'm so excited to hang out with you today because we're gonna talk about something that's so important. It's a trending topic in our world that's impacting all our lives on a daily basis. And I know it's something God wants us to see, to care about, and even do something about, however we can. But before I tell you what the trending topic is, I have a question for you. Do you like stories? Now, you might not read bedtime stories anymore, but confession, I still love them. I still love to read a good story every night. Maybe you're not into those kinds of stories, but you probably have heard a crazy, funny, or powerful story at least once in your life. In fact, I want you to think of one right now. Maybe you overheard someone at school telling a true story of something that happened to them. Maybe one of your grandparents has that same funny story that they tell over and over and over again. Maybe your best friend has that almost unbelievable story about a life-changing experience. Stories like that can be so interesting that you just can't help but lean in and listen. And that's the thing about stories. They don't just entertain you, they have the potential to change you. They have a way of helping you get to know others better. Stories can help us see things in a different way. That's why today is gonna be a little different than what we usually do around here, because we know the power of stories. So we want you to hear from a few really amazing people in just a minute. In fact, their stories can help us understand that trending topic we're gonna talk about today, and that's racial tension. Race is one of the things we don't get to choose about our lives. It's something we're all born with, and it doesn't change. But throughout history, there have been people who don't understand, accept, or even like people whose race is different than their own. And that causes racial tension, which is simply the struggle or anger that exists between people or groups of different races. Maybe you know this because you've seen stories on the news or online that talk about racial tension in the world. Or maybe you know this because there are members of your family who talk openly about the way they feel about people of different races. Maybe you know this because you've seen it happen at your school, in your neighborhood, or in your community. Maybe you don't really know a lot about racial tension because you actually haven't seen it or experienced it. Or maybe you know it because racial tension is something you experience every single day. No matter what your experience or knowledge of racial tension is, my hope is that after hearing these stories from real people with real experiences, you are challenged to think about it differently. So let's lean in, listen, and learn from these stories.
Hi, my name is Charlie, and I grew up in the smallest town ever, on a farm in the middle of Illinois, and everyone, they look like me. In fact, I never met a person that didn't look like me until I went to college. That's pretty wild, right? I mean, my eyes were open to so many different cultures and stories, and I love learning from everyone. But then I became a mom, and I was very blessed to parent kids from different cultures, different races, and from different countries. It was a lot of fun, but that didn't mean it was always easy. Being a parent to kids from different races definitely had its challenges for me. There were some things that some of my kids faced that the others didn't. They would go to the same place with the same people, and their experiences would sometimes be completely different because of their race. I tried really hard to encourage each of my kids based on what they were going through, but sometimes it was just better for me just to listen to them and to hear their stories. See, racial tension looks different for everyone, but the effects of it are still very powerful. Working through our challenges as a family made me realize that everyone has their own unique story. But it also made me wonder, because I'm a white mom and my kids were different races from me and each other, would I ever truly understand what each of my kids were experiencing?
Hey, I'm Bobby, and when I was in the 8th grade, we had a school dance where the girls were supposed to ask the guys to go with them. Now, I hope that a particular girl would ask me to take her to the dance because I really liked her. And guess what? She asked me, and I said yes. And y'all, I was so excited that I got my outfit ready weeks in advance, like weeks. A few days after she asked me to the dance, my school had a skate party, and I met her dad for the first time. He introduced himself to me, and we talked for a few minutes. After the skate party, the girl came up to me and told me that she couldn't go with me to the dance anymore. Y'all, I was so devastated that I didn't even go to the dance. I just stayed home and watched TV. And you know, I spent years wondering why things changed all of a sudden. So when I saw her a few years later, I asked her why she didn't go to the dance with me. And she told me her dad wouldn't let me take her to the dance because I'm Black. There was literally no other reason except the color of my skin. And at the time, I couldn't understand why. It was at that moment I started questioning so many things about myself. See, sometimes we don't always understand why people are unfair because of race. I couldn't understand why someone would do that to me. Like, will this be an issue I'll always deal with for the rest of my life?
What's up, everyone? I'm Caleb, and I'm biracial. And for me, that means my mom is white and my dad is Black. Growing up biracial, I faced the challenge of not really knowing where I fit in. Sometimes I used to feel like I had to say or do certain things around my Black friends and family to be accepted by them. And then I feel like I had to say or do other things around my white friends and family to be accepted by them. I remember a time I was hanging out with some friends and one of them told me, "Caleb, you're the whitest Black person I know." I had no idea what that meant or even if it was a compliment or insult, but it definitely made me feel uncomfortable because I felt that I had to cancel out one part of me to be accepted by another. There was another time when I was getting ready to take a major test and we had to fill in the option to specify our race. And I joked to a friend that I didn't know which choice I should select. And that friend said, "What do you mean? Aren't you just Black?" Those situations made me feel, when it came to race, I had to pick a side, be either Black or white. And since my hair and skin color are darker than some biracial people's, I felt like I had to choose to be Black because that's how people saw me. I didn't have a problem that my friends thought I was only Black, but that wasn't the complete representation of who I am. Here's the thing, it can be very uncomfortable when other people try to label you by your race. And in my case, why couldn't I just be accepted for who I was? Like, just Caleb.
Hi friends, my name is Esther and I am Venezuelan. I was born in Venezuela and my family moved to the United States when I was 14. I remember being very excited to move to the US. I couldn't wait to meet new people and make new friends, and that's exactly what I did. I had friends from all kinds of cultures, and I love learning so many things about my friends, and they always ask me questions about my life too. One time, a friend asked me how I felt about some awful things happening in the news. An innocent person was killed by a police officer from a different race, and everyone was talking about it. I realized that other than my friend, no one ever asked me my opinion when it came to race. Even though I did have my own thoughts and feelings about it, I didn't think anyone really cared what I thought about racial tension. Sometimes it feels like if you're not part of the conflict, your opinion doesn't matter. Where I live, the conflict always seems to be between races different than my own. So I felt like I didn't always get to have a voice. So I continued to listen and learn from my friends when they talk, but I kept my thoughts to myself. And I always wonder, where do I fit into this conversation?
Hey guys, I'm Jean, and I'm Korean American, which means both of my parents are Korean, and I was born here in the United States. When I was growing up, the school that I went to had people from all different cultures and countries and backgrounds, and a lot of my friends ended up being actually from the Middle East, and we always had the best time. When I was in high school, there was an awful attack on the United States. Some of you might already know what happened on September 11th in 2001, but if you haven't heard, it was the day a group of people from the Middle East crashed airplanes into really important buildings in the United States. Thousands of people suffered and even lost their lives from this attack. It was a really awful time. What made me really sad was how my friends were treated after the attack. People in my school were so mean to my friends who were from the Middle East just because they were of the same race as the people who attacked the country. My friends didn't even know the people who did it. No one realized that my friends were just as scared as anyone else who lived in the United States. But somehow, it seemed like people blamed my friends for something they weren't even a part of. I knew that my friends were really hurt by the things people said to them, and I knew it was wrong for them to be treated unfairly. But I honestly didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to stand up for my friends. And the truth is, sometimes people don't know how to stand up for others who were treated unfairly because of their race. Even though I did my best to comfort my friends in private, why didn't I just stand up for them in public? I've always wondered, what could I have done to help more?
Hi everyone, I'm Katie. I'm Japanese, but I'm 4th generation. So that means that my great-grandparents were born here in the United States where I was born. But then my great-great-grandparents were born in Japan. But I grew up here in the United States in a big city with lots of different people. When I was in school, I never really thought about racial tension much. To be honest, I wasn't aware of all of the pain around this topic. Because my parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents grew up in the United States, it made me feel a little more disconnected from my Japanese culture. I knew I looked different than most of the people I was around, but I accepted myself and others just the way they were. And I was around kind-hearted people who did the same. I mean, all of my friends were of different races. It wasn't until I went to college that I really began learning about the hard realities of this issue. I learned that so many people were being affected by racism and racial tension, and honestly, I didn't know what to do about it. All I knew is that it made me feel really confused and really sad. I kept wondering, what exactly are people experiencing when it comes to racial tension?
Hey everyone, my name is Shane, and I'm biracial. My dad is Mexican, and my mom is white. Now, I grew up not knowing much about my Mexican side at all. It's not that my family didn't want to tell me about that part of my background, but it's just a side that I wasn't exposed to all that much. I remember this one particular day in high school. I was taking a Spanish class, and one of my classmates said to me, "Shouldn't you know how to speak Spanish already?" That one question alone assumed that I should automatically know the language just because I was part Hispanic, but I didn't. I still don't. Their question, it wasn't embarrassing, and it honestly didn't bother me at all, but it did challenge me to learn more about my Hispanic background. I knew there were so many different pieces that make up a culture: the food, the style, the history, the holidays. But I didn't know my own culture. I realized that even though I grew up mostly around one side of my family, there was still more to my life to discover. Some of us, we don't know everything about our race, and we're still learning. Was I wrong for not knowing everything about mine?
Some of those were really hard for me to hear. but I'm really thankful they were willing to share their experiences. See, that's the thing about stories. They help you see things that you wouldn't have seen or think about something in a way you might not have before. No matter where you fit into all of this, I'm glad you heard these stories. First, so you can know you're not alone in what you're thinking, feeling, or experiencing. See, each person's story is equally important. Each person in these stories we just heard looked different from each other. They all had a completely different experience when it comes to race, but they also all shared something in common. They were all affected by racial tension in real and significant ways. We've only shared a few stories today, but there are so many others we could have heard on this topic. You might even be able to think of a few more examples yourself. Like, what about the story of someone who was unkind? Someone who treated others from different races unfairly? Where do they fit into this? Maybe you've heard someone talking about another race in a negative way. Maybe you've even had negative thoughts about other races because of the things you've heard, seen, or experienced. Those stories are important to talk about too. See, when it comes to race, sometimes our differences cause people to think of others as less than or themselves as better, which is known as bias. If we aren't careful, bias can lead us to treat others differently or poorly, and that's discrimination. When we treat others worse because of a bias, it can cause incredible pain, and ultimately, it can create more racial tension in our world. And here's the truth I want you to know today. Our differences in race don't have to mean something negative. In fact, they shouldn't mean something negative. Why? Well, because God designed race to be a beautiful and unique representation of who God is. Here's how I know. In the book of Genesis, the very first book of the Bible, we get the details of how God created the world. One by one, God made everything we see and experience in the world. And then God made people. And here's what the writer of Genesis said about that. So God created mankind in his own image. Out of all the things God created, people are who reflect God's image. Reflecting God's image means when people see you, they see more of who God is. They see more of who God is in the way you act, the way you talk, the way you treat others, and the way that you are uniquely you. The word mankind in this verse is so important because it means all of humankind. That means there isn't just one person, one group, or one race that better reflects God's image than any other. There isn't one race that points to God more than any other. In fact, together we reflect the image of God. And that's pretty amazing. But unfortunately, you and I both know that sometimes the world doesn't see it this way. Because even though God made each of us to uniquely reflect that image, not all people act as if that's true. Some people treat people of other races like they don't belong. Some people use hurtful words or language toward people who don't look like them. Some people act out in anger or even hate towards other races. And not only do those things cause more racial tension in our world, they're also not reflecting or respecting the image of God in each other. So, what do we do about it? If together we reflect the image of God, then how can we better understand how to treat one another like that's true? I think we can find our answer in Jesus. See, knowing Jesus changes everything. It changes the way we see ourselves and others, and it changes the way we treat the people around us, those who look like us, and those who don't. During his time on earth, Jesus showed us what it looks like to treat all people with value and respect. He constantly stood up for and helped people who are hurt, abused, or treated unfairly simply because of who they were. And in doing that, Jesus was not only reflecting God's love to the world, but he was also setting the example for how we should all treat each other too. One of Jesus' followers talked about this in a letter that we can read in the Bible today. I think it's safe to say that this guy knew Jesus pretty well because he was actually Jesus' brother, James. Like Jesus, James grew up in a culture where some people were treated better than others. It was normal. It was so common that they may not have even noticed they were doing it. But because James knew Jesus, he knew there was a better way. So let's take a look at what he said. My dear brothers and sisters, how can you claim to have faith in our glorious Lord Jesus Christ if you favor some people over others? When James used that word, favor, he was talking about something similar to bias. So basically, James was saying, how can you say you follow Jesus but still treat some people like they're better than others? Because James knew Jesus set the example. And if we say we have faith in Jesus and want to follow him, then how we treat people really matters. When we act out of bias or do things that contribute to the racial tension in this world, we're not reflecting what following Jesus really looks like to the world around us. James went on to say this, "Yes, indeed, it is good when you obey the royal law as found in the scriptures. Love your neighbor as yourself. But if you favor some people over others, you are committing a sin. You are guilty of breaking the law." That royal law that James was talking about is part of what Jesus called the greatest or most important commandment, to love our neighbors as ourselves. In other words, to treat people the way we want to be treated. So, if we wouldn't want to be judged by the color of our skin, we shouldn't judge others that way. If it would hurt us to be called names simply because of who we are, then we shouldn't use those names toward others. If we wouldn't want to be left out because of our race, then we shouldn't leave others out because of their race. And if we'd want someone to stand up for us, then we need to stand up for the people we see being treated unfairly because of their race. When we follow that command to love our neighbor as ourselves, we are honoring the image of God in them and in ourselves. And if we don't, well, James said that any favor or bias we might show towards others is actually a sin. That means it's something that goes directly against the way Jesus tells us to live. So, when it comes to racial tension in our world, we have a responsibility. First, to see and respect the image of God in every human being. And second, as followers of Jesus, to treat others the way we want to be treated. Because remember, knowing Jesus changes everything. It makes us different. And that means even if racial tension seems common in our world, it can't be common with us. Remember, together we reflect the image of God. That means every person, no matter their age, gender, or race, is important and should be treated with respect. Now, if you've been hurt or mistreated because of your race, I want you to know that's awful. And that is not okay. The pain you feel is real. I'm so sorry that's how you've been treated. And I want you to know that here, that's not okay. We are committed to making this a safe place for you to talk about your experiences and to find people who are willing to walk with you and stand beside you through it. And if you're someone who hasn't experienced any bias or poor treatment because of your race, you may feel that this is difficult to understand. Maybe, like the people James wrote to, you never really noticed this before. Or maybe you're someone who's trying to change the way you treat people, or even change your mind about the bias you might have had in the past. That's amazing, and I'm so glad that you're here too, because we want you to be part of this conversation with us. It's so important to listen to people who are willing to share their stories like the ones we heard today. Stories that help us learn and grow and change and understand. So, remember those stories we listened to earlier? I want to go back to those for a minute. Let's hear more of what was learned along the way.
If you ever felt like your opinions aren't really heard when it comes to racial tension, know that you're important because together we reflect the image of God. You're not too young to have feelings around this issue, and your voice should still be heard by those who care about you. Your experiences are not too small. And even if no one asks, you're still invited to say how you feel with love and respect.
If you've experienced unfair treatment because of your race like I did, I first want to say it's totally not okay. And I'm really sorry you experienced that. But remember, you have the right to stand up for yourself. If you don't know where to start, try talking to someone you trust. Let them know what you're experiencing and how you're feeling. And remember, you're amazing just the way God made you. And you weren't created to doubt who you are or feel less than anyone else.
For anyone who may have felt a little confused like I did in being biracial, I want to encourage you to embrace everything about the way God made you and others. You don't have to pick a side if you're biracial. All parts of you are unique, and that makes you complete. You can just be you. Accept and appreciate that you are unique. And if you run into people who don't fully understand you, that's okay. You can remind them and yourself what makes you, you.
Whether or not you have friendships with people from different races, remember that the goal is always to love everyone well, no matter what, and understand that our differences are what make us all unique. Actually, our differences are what make it possible to reflect the image of God. There's so much to know and learn about God, and getting to know other people help us to do that. Loving and listening to others can create amazing bonds that you never knew were possible. Getting to know people from races different than your own is such a beautiful experience because it helps us to see God by opening our eyes to the world around us. So open your eyes and then do your best to connect with others and support your friends any way that you can. It's so worth it when the end result is loving everyone well.
If you've ever felt like me and didn't know what to do when others were being mistreated because of their race, I want you to know how important it is to be brave and speak up for others when you see unfair treatment. Not just because it'll make you a better friend to those you really care about, but it'll also make you a better person overall. It may seem scary or confusing in knowing what the best words to say are, but I guarantee when you stand up for what's right and fair, speaking up is better than staying silent. And you never know. It can mean so much to the ones you stand up for.
If you feel like you don't know much about racial tension, know that you're not alone. I didn't know much about it either, but I committed to studying about this issue. I started reading more about this to get a better understanding. But even more than reading about racial tension, I began listening to some of my friends and asked them to share their stories with me. Hearing their experiences gave a new outlook on just how real this issue was. It's so important to listen to others and don't be afraid to ask respectful questions.
If you're biracial like me and don't know the full background of your racial history, know that it's never too late to learn. Since together we reflect the image of God, it's good to know the part that your race plays in that. You can start by doing research on your family and asking relatives to talk to you about your culture. As you learn, don't forget to celebrate the great things you find, and even use this time to learn about other cultures too.
Those are so good and so challenging for all of us. And I know you have your own story, and so do all of your friends. That's why groups are so important. We want these groups to be filled with people who will support you, stand up for you, and stand beside you if you're experiencing racial tension. We want them to be a place where you can ask questions and even begin to change your mind. We want our entire church, not the building, like the people. That means you and everyone you know, to reflect the image of God to the world. How? In the way we treat each other, because together we reflect the image of God.
Friends, together we reflect God's image. Every single person is deserving of respect, kindness, and love. It doesn't matter how we look. It doesn't matter how we present to the world. God has created each and every one of us in his image. And so it's so important for us to remember that truth, because oftentimes we judge people or we make assumptions or we treat them differently based on how they look. This doesn't only come with racial tension, but it comes with ableism. When we see someone that's not able to function the same way that we do, maybe they are on crutches or maybe they're in a wheelchair, we automatically assume and sometimes place judgment on those people. That happens a lot with races. In the past year and a half, we've heard a lot on the news about Asian hate when COVID came out, and a lot about Black Lives Matter when the murder of George Floyd happened. These things are real. They're happening in our world today. And it's our job as Christians, as followers of Christ, to see every single person and treat them with love, respect, and kindness. Friends, I know almost each and every one of you that creates this group. And we are such a dynamic group, and I love that. And I hope that today we take action. That we don't only listen to the stories, all the amazing stories that we heard today. We don't only listen to them, but we actually figure out ways that we can apply what we learned today. And to be respectful, to see and treat everyone the way that we want to be treated. And it sounds like such a basic thing. I mean, we tell like little kids that. We say, treat everyone the way you want to be treated. And we say that to little kids. But that is the truth, friends. And sometimes we've got to even say that to ourselves. That's the most important thing. I want you to drop in the chat if you feel safe to do it. If not, don't worry. But if you feel safe, I want you to lean in and tell us about a time where you were treated differently because of the color of your skin or because of the race. A lot of us have those stories, even as young as we are. A lot of us have those stories. And so if you feel safe and you want to share, put that in the chat. I want us to be together with each other. Now again, sometimes we are so lucky to live in Scarborough or in the GTA because there's so many cultures and there's so many races. And sometimes I know we're so lucky and we think, well, I mean, my whole school looks different. We all make up different parts. And so I've never really had anyone hate me for the color of my skin or say anything because I'm Asian or because I'm brown. And that's great. And that's amazing. And I really, really want that for everyone because that's what the kingdom of heaven looks like. It looks different for everyone. But if you have and you feel safe and you want to share, tell us about that. Share those moments with us so we can be there for you, with you, and we can be praying for you. But let's jump into some of those small group questions, all right? So here's the first one, and I want you guys to be leaning in. So I'm gonna read the question, and I want you to do your best to respond through the chat, all right? First question is this. Why do you think it's important to talk about things like racial tension? The next question is this. Which story today connected with you the best and why? And our last question for today is this: what does it mean to reflect the image of God? That's kind of a tricky one. Let me say it again. What does it mean to reflect the image of God? Junior highs, it's so important that we're honest with each other. We're honest in this group, we're honest at this church, and we're an honest community. That is what is so important. And I hope that you hear my heart when I say, I want us to be having these conversations. I don't want this to be a conversation that we shy away from or that we don't talk about. And so thank you for leaning into the chat and being vulnerable and being honest in the chat. And if you have some stories or some questions, or you're really wondering, Leader Steph, how do I even start? How do I start making action and being about it and not just saying it? How do I do that? If you've got some questions, I want you to feel free to connect with one of your leaders, me, Leader Melissa, Leader Aaron, Leader Abigail. We are here for you. We're your community. We're your leaders. We love you and we care about you. And we want to have these conversations with you. All right, let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, God, we thank you that we all make up your image, that it was totally your intention to create us all differently. And God, I thank you for that. I thank you that you've created us in your image and that we all look different, but we all make up this one community, a community who loves you, God, and who wants to see your love spread out throughout the whole world. Father, right now, I just pray for any of us who've experienced any racialized discrimination, like that we were treated differently because of the race, the color of our skin, the way that our families are, God. I just pray for that, Father. And Lord, I pray that this one teaching isn't it. That we take what we learned, we take what we heard in all of those stories, and we apply them. We make a difference, God. Lord, I thank you for each and every one of the junior highs that make up this group. And I pray for all of them that they become followers of you who know your love and who treat everybody with kindness and respect and love, God. Because we are all deserving of kindness, respect, and love. Thank you for loving us the most and for showing us how we can treat every single person. We pray all these things in your wonderful name. Amen. Amen. Well, friends, I love hanging out with you. I love it. I'm going to be joining you next week as we jump into a brand new series. Cannot wait. And yeah, I'll see you then. But remember, if you've got any questions, feel free to connect with one of your leaders because we're here for you and we want to be here. We want to walk this walk with you. We're not just about the talk, you know? We can talk the talk, but can we walk the walk? Okay, I'm going to stop. I'll see you later. Bye, guys.